Can't hear you.
That's what happened. He muted me without telling me. Hey, welcome, friends. Well, whether you're new or joining us on a regular basis, we're glad you're with us. If you are new, you can catch this and older podcast live streams at ministrytomuslims.com. You just go to M2M upcoming events and then engaging the followers of Islam, and then M2M meeting room. And you see the whole string of recent broadcasts we've had. And tonight we've got another great one. We have our brother Samuel Green coming to us from down under, and we'll get to him in a minute. Just wanted to say that well, let me introduce him. Samuel Green's been engaging Muslims for decades. He has been involved in campus ministry. You can catch some of his debates online. He's regular in that. And he's written a fantastic book that I got a hold of recently called Where to Start with Islam. So that's available too. We'd love to just have you learn more through his teaching. And his topic for tonight is going to be From Muhammad to the Synoptic Qurans. From Muhammad to the Synoptic Qurans. So we'll let him loose in a minute, but let me just give this time to the Lord, and we'll go with it. So let's do that. Father, we bow our heads and hearts and ask you guide us, and thank you that you're the ultimate source of truth, that we can rest secure in that. We thank you for faithful servants like Samuel that are ready and willing to share with us. Free us from distractions as we prepare to listen, take mental notes, and sometimes engage as we have the opportunity. So we praise you and thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, Samuel Green.
Hey, it's great to be with everyone.
Go ahead. Sorry, Samuel.
Yeah, I was going to say that thank you for having me on your program, and it's great to be with everyone today.
All right, you've got a PowerPoint here. There it is.
I have. So today I want to look at this topic of From Muhammad to the Synoptic Qurans. And the reason I want to look at this is often when we're talking to our Muslim friends, we find out very quickly that they are prepared for the Bible. We find that they're prepared for the Bible, and this is because generally Muslims are taught that the Bible has been corrupted. And so, of course, for those of us who love the Word of God, who love the Bible, and we want to use that in our evangelism, it can be quite difficult to move past this point, because the Muslim has been brought up to doubt the Bible, to be skeptical of it, and very often to know how to attack it. Not all will know how to do that, but we're still dealing with this idea of doubt and the untrustworthiness of the Bible. And so this comes up in our evangelism. This comes up just in talking to Muslims. And so that's why I want to look at this topic today as to what can we say about the Quran, because I want to show you how we need to go in answering this question. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flick through my slides here. And the first point I want to bring up is, if a Muslim is attacking the Bible, if a Muslim's saying the Bible's been changed, you're showing them a verse from the Bible and they're saying it's been changed, it's not reliable, whatever it is, I think the first thing we need to realize is that if as Christians we just address the issue of the Bible and we look at the Bible's trustworthiness, we're not actually engaging with the subject. Okay, So the Muslim, often when we speak to them, will say the Bible's been changed. And so we can go and give our evidence from the manuscripts, from the ancient translations, from the ancient quotes. We can go and present our information there. And we have great information to show that the Bible's been very well preserved. And we can do that. But I want to say that that's not the best way forward, because when we do that, we're not actually dealing with what they believe. Because Muslims do not just believe that the Bible's been changed, they also believe that there is one perfect Quran that has not been changed in any way. And so it's more of a two-pronged attack that they have against Christians. It's that the Bible's been changed and that the Quran hasn't been changed, and there's one perfect Quran. And so this is why they feel confident to attack the Bible, because they say, well, the Quran is not like the Bible. So we need to realize that when a Muslim is attacking the Bible, there's actually two arguments happening here. The trouble is, they very often don't mention the Quran. So even though they believe the Bible's been changed and there's one perfect Quran, they won't bring up the Quran with you. They will just bring up the Bible with you, and they'll want to keep talking about the Bible. In fact, I've had online chats with Muslims who have said to me, I just want to talk about the Bible. I don't want to talk about the Quran at all. And so they just want to attack the Bible. They don't want to discuss the Quran, even though what they believe about the Quran is there's one perfect Quran, it's never been changed. So if you want to have progress in your discussions with a Muslim, you need to discuss both books. That's all I'm saying now. You need to discuss both books. If you're going to just look at one book, it's not going to be balanced. If you're just going to look at the Bible, you're going to create an impression that is not true. And really, this is how Muslims argue when it comes to the Bible. They argue by creating an impression. It's not so much facts. They'll look at certain details, and from these try to make an impression that the Bible's corrupted, and then by inference, the Quran's perfect. But we're not going to look at the Quran, we're just going to look at the Bible. So we look at the Bible, hammer the Bible, and then by inference, create the impression that the Quran is better. Okay, so I'm just sort of going over that because you need to understand how this argument works. They will address the Bible and stay away from the Quran, but you need to look at both books if you want to actually answer this. So that's what I want to do now. Now, what I've got there is you can see the URL, and that takes you to a leaflet that you can download and give to your Muslim friend. If you're doing street evangelism or something like that, you can print this out and give it to them. I'm going to now look at what is it that the Muslims say about the Quran, because as I said, if Muslims want to attack the Bible, we need to respond to them by looking at both books. And so I will say to a Muslim, I'll say to them, are you saying that the Bible's corrupted and that there's one perfect Quran? Is that what you're saying to me? So you have to get that clear on the table. If they attack the Bible, you say, are you saying the Bible's corrupted and there's one perfect Quran? You need to get them to do that. And then they'll most likely say, yes, that's what I'm saying. And they're going to say that because this is what they're taught about the Quran. I thought we'd have a look at the common things that they say. The text of the Quran is entirely reliable. It has been as it is, unaltered, unedited, not tampered with in any way since the time of its revelation. Or again, the Quran was memorized by Muhammad and then dictated to his companions and written down by scribes who cross-checked it during his lifetime. Not one word of its 114 chapters have ever been changed over the centuries. The Quran is the only scripture which has been preserved in its exact original form, in its entire content. It was revealed, as it was revealed to the Prophet 1400 years ago, not a word added or removed. This is a historical fact beyond dispute. God himself has assured us of its preservation in Surah 15, verse 9. Thus, there has been only one version of the Quran across all the world throughout all ages, right from the time of the Prophet. I think that's my last quote there. Let's see. No, I'll just do this one. No other book in the world can match the Quran. The astonishing fact about the Book of Allah is that it has remained unchanged, even to a dot, over the last 1400 years. No variation of text can be found in it. You can check this for yourself by listening to the recitation of Muslims from different parts of the world. So that's what Muslims are commonly taught. And for those of us involved in evangelism, we know that this is how Muslims often convert people to Islam. They make these claims about the Quran, they attack the Bible, and Christians or people who don't know about Islam believe that these claims are true. Now, what is it, in summary, what is it that Muslim leaders are saying about the Quran? Well, Muhammad perfectly memorized the Quran. He simply dictated the Quran to his followers who memorized it, and they wrote it down with no editing. Muhammad examined and approved what was written. There has only ever been one version of the Quran. All Qurans are identical with no variance. The Quran is perfectly preserved, and these claims are proved true by history. And the Quran is superior to other scriptures in its preservation and hence its message about God. So that's sort of my introduction there to paint the context for us and what we experience when we're doing evangelism with Muslims. These are the arguments that we come up against. Now, what I want to do today is to actually look at what the Islamic history actually says. Our brother Jay Smith and others have looked at an alternative, critical histories for the Quran. I want to do something different here. I just want to look at what do the Islamic histories themselves say. If I just take Islam on its own terms and just look at what its histories actually say about the Quran, what do they say, and do they actually agree with what Muslims are being taught? So that's what I want to do now, and I'm just going to work my way through. I'm basically going to work through these points that Muslims say, and we're going to see whether or not they're true. And as I said, my booklet takes you through these points, and so you can give that booklet to a Muslim to read, and that will hopefully level the playing field for you and make them open to the Bible. So let's look at the first one, and you may want to make that a little bit bigger there so people can read it. Did Muhammad perfectly memorize the Quran? Well, according to the Islamic sources, no. Now, sorry, can you make that picture a little bit bigger and make me a bit smaller? Just change the size there so people can read it. No, I will read it off my other screen. Narrated by Aisha, the Prophet heard a man reciting the Quran in the mosque and said, "May Allah bestow his mercy on him. He has reminded me of such and such verses of such a surah." Now that's interesting, isn't it? Here it is in both Bukhari and Muslim saying that Muhammad had not memorized the Quran and he was reminded of it by other people. Again, narrated by Abdullah ibn Masud, Muhammad said, "I am only a human being and I forget just as you do. So when I forget, remind me." Again, from one of the 6 canonical collections of hadiths. And then we actually find this within the Quran itself. We will make you recite, O Muhammad, and you will not forget except what Allah should will. So here is the verses within the Quran confirming what we find in the hadith, that Muhammad he does forget, but he only forgets what Allah wills him to forget. And we see this again in Surah 2, verse 106. We will not abrogate a verse or cause it to be forgotten, except that we bring forth a better one than it or similar to it. So you see there, the idea that the Quran was perfectly memorized simply has no grounds in the Islamic sources, right? It doesn't have any grounds in the Quran. It doesn't have any grounds within the hadith. Both of these Islamic sources, the Quran and the Hadith, acknowledge that forgetting happened. And in the case of the Quran, it said it was Allah's will when it was forgotten. But that's our first point. And this is actually a really powerful one to show Muslims that Muhammad did not perfectly remember the Quran. Let's move on to our next one. Now, did Muhammad simply recite the Quran with no editing? Again, this is a claim made by Muslims that God gave the Quran, or Allah gave the Quran to Gabriel or one of the angels. The angels then spoke it to Muhammad, and then Muhammad spoke it to his disciples, and they just they simply recited it. That they simply memorized it, and there was no editing in this process. Thanks. That's probably the best way to keep the screen now. And so there's no editing in this process. But if you actually go and read the Hadith of Bukhari and Muslim, which are the main ones, we actually see that editing was part of the process of the Quran. Okay, so let's look at this one here. Narrated by Al-Bara, there was revealed, not equal are those believers who sit at home and those who strive and fight in the cause of Allah, which is Surah 4, verse 95. So here we see, it begins by quoting this verse from Surah 4, verse 95, but that's not actually how the verse is in the Quran today. The Prophet then said, call Zayd for me and let him bring the writing board, the ink pot, and the scapular bone, that is the pen. Then he said, write, not equal are those believers who sit. And at that time, Amir bin Maktam, the blind man, was sitting behind the Prophet. He said, O Allah's apostle, what is your order for me as regard to the above verse? As I am blind. So you need to understand what's happening. The original way this verse is written, as we can see here, is that Muslims are not equal, right? If a Muslim does not go out and fight on jihad, they're not equal to those Muslims who stay at home. But of course, what about people who are disabled? What about if you're blind? You know, and so that's what's happened with Amir bin Maktab. He's a blind man, and he's saying, what about me, Allah's apostle? You know, I'm blind. Are you saying that I'm lesser than the mujahideen because I don't go out on jihad? So what happens? Well, so instead of the above verse, right? So instead of this verse, the following verse was revealed. Not equal are those believers who sit at home, except for those who are disabled and those who strive and fight in Allah, in the cause of Allah. So you can see how this verse has now changed. Initially, it said that Muslims who don't go out and join Muhammad on jihad are not equal to those who do. So the jihadists have a higher position before Allah than those who don't go out on jihad. That didn't work, that verse, because some Muslims can't go out on jihad. So what are you saying? And so the verse changes to now say, except for those who are disabled. Now, you can see there, again, that this is in both Bukhari and Muslim. So it's what happened. There's no doubt with this verse. But it shows that Muhammad was editing the verses. He would use the verses, see how they would go, and then edit them into a final form. Now, again, this happens so much that, like the memory verses and Muhammad forgetting, and we saw that in the Quran, so too we find Muhammad editing the verses having to be addressed in the Quran. So let's look at Surah 16, verse 101. And when we exchange a verse in place of another, and God knows very well what he is sending down, they, the Meccans, say to Muhammad, you are simply inventing this. So you can see how the Meccans are seeing that Muhammad is, exchanging verses. The verses are changing. And the Meccans are saying, you're just making this up, right? That this isn't something that comes from God and is set. This comes down and then you change the verses around. And so, again, what I'm saying here is Muslims say to us that the Quran just comes straight from God and is straight written down in the Quran with no editing. That is simply not what the Islamic sources say. Let's continue. Now, did Muhammad have only one version of the Quran? That's another thing that we're told. Muhammad had one version of the Quran. Well, again, this is not what the Islamic sources say. Narrated by Amir bin al-Khattab, I heard Hisham bin Hakim reciting Surah Al-Furqan during the lifetime of Allah's apostle, and I listened to his recitation and noticed that he recited in several different ways, which Allah's apostle had not taught me. I was about to jump over him during his prayer, but I controlled my temper, and when he had completed his prayer, I put his upper garment around his neck. So it's like strangling the guy, and seized him by it and said, "Who taught you this surah which I heard you reciting?" He replied, "Allah's apostle taught it to me." I said, "You have told a lie, for Allah's apostle taught it to me in a different way from yours." So I dragged him to Allah's apostle and said, "I heard this person reciting Surat Al-Furqan in a way which you haven't taught me." On that, Allah's apostle said, "Release him, O Umar, recite, O Hisham." Then he recited in the same way I heard him reciting. Then Allah's apostle said, "It was revealed in this way." He added, "Recite, O Umar." I recited it as he taught me. Allah's apostle then said, "It was revealed in this way." This Quran has been revealed in 7 different ways, so recite it in whichever is easier for you. Now, Umar bin al-Khattab and Hisham bin Hakim, they were both from the same tribe. So they've both got the same dialect of Arabic. Therefore, this is not a dialectic difference at this stage. They develop later on. But my point here is, if we read the Islamic sources, there was never one time when there's just one Quran. So again, we saw in those opening quotes that I gave, and this is what Muslims will say to us. They'll say there's different versions of the Bible, and by that they generally mean the translations. There are different Bibles, but there's one Quran, and this is what they say to us. But you can see here, this is not even what the Islamic sources say. Okay, I'll just read again from Ibn Masud. I heard a person reciting a Quranic verse in a certain way, and I had heard the Prophet reciting the same verse in a different way. So I took him to the Prophet and informed him of what I took him to the Prophet and informed him of that, but I noticed the sign of disapproval on his face. And then he said, "Both of you are correct. So don't differ, for the nations before you differed, so they were destroyed." So again, the idea that there's one Quran, one way of, the word Quran means reciting. It means the recitation. And here we have different recitations. That is, you have different Qurans, because that's what the word Quran means. It means reciting. And so here we have different recitings. So we have different Qurans. We'll keep working our way through. Now, how did Muhammad himself preserve the Quran? Let's think about, how did Muhammad himself do it? Well, the Quran did not start as one complete finished book. Instead, Muhammad recited different verses and surahs in response to different situations in his life. This happened over a 23-year period. As we saw in the 2 previous sections, Muhammad preserved these by teaching them to others and on some occasions having them written down. Now, in particular, there were certain men who Muhammad commissioned to be teachers of the Quran. So what I'm looking at here is, how did Muhammad himself set up, what did Muhammad himself set up for the transmission of the Quran? And what we see is he commissioned certain teachers who were to teach it to others. So I heard the Prophet saying, "Learn the Quran from 4 men, Abdullah ibn Masud, Salim, Mu'adha, and Ubay ibn Ka'b." So you can see what Muhammad has set up here. He's saying, learn the Quran from certain commissioned teachers who had obviously learnt the Quran well from Muhammad. So what have I got here? Therefore, Muhammad preserved the Quran by teaching it himself, authorizing certain men as teachers of the Quran, and having some of it written down. This is what Muhammad set up to preserve the Quran. Now, Was the Quran collected into one book under Muhammad's supervision? Okay, because this is what, again, Muslims say in their quotes, that Muhammad compiled the Quran, brought it all together, and there was one complete collection of the Quran before he died. Well, that's just false. That's against what the Islamic sources say. So again, this is from Sahih Bukhari, narrated Zayd bin Thabit. A man comes to Umar and says, therefore I, Umar, suggest to you, Abu Bakr, that you order that the Quran be collected. I said to Umar, how can you do something which Allah's apostle did not do? Now notice this. Umar is saying to Abu Bakr is the first caliph, he's saying, order that the Quran be collected and brought together. And he's saying, how can you do something which Allah's apostle did not do? That is, Muhammad never made a collection of the Quran. There is no final form from him. Abu Bakr kept on urging me, that is urging Zayd, to accept this idea until Allah opened my chest for what he had opened the chests of Abu Bakr and Allah to. So I started looking for the Quran and collecting it from what was written on palm stalks, thin white stones, and also from men who knew it by heart. I found the last verse of Surat al-Tawbah, that is repentance, with Abi Khuzaimah al-Ansari. I did not find it with anyone other than him. So what we can see here from the Islamic sources is Muhammad never brought the Quran together. Right? That is, there is no autograph from Muhammad. Now, this is really important. When you study textual criticism, the autograph is the original copy. So with Matthew's gospel, there is an autograph to Matthew. That is, the Apostle Matthew wrote Matthew. There's an original one that Matthew made from which other copies were made. The thing with the Quran is there is no autograph from Muhammad. There are verses and surahs in different collections by different people, as we'll see in a moment, but they have never been brought together into one book. There's no autograph. This is really important. Now, and so Muhammad's companions, we see, had to discuss among themselves what parts to include in their collections of the Quran. Remember that Muhammad commissioned 4 particular men to make collections of the Quran. These men, after Muhammad had died, started to make their own collections. So listen to this from Sahih Muslim. Ibn Abbas reported Allah's messenger, may peace be upon him, as saying, if there were for the son of Adam a valley full of riches, he would long to possess another like it. And the son of Adam does not feel satisfied but with dust. And Allah returns to him who returns to him. Now, listen to this. So what Ibn Abbas has done there is he's given 2 quotes, right? And that they actually represent surahs, the first one in particular. And then Ibn Abbas said, I do not know whether it is from the Quran or not. And in the narration transmitted by Zuhair, it is said, I do not know whether it is from the Quran, but he didn't mention Ibn Abbas. Now, my point here is Ibn Abbas is a significant companion for both Sunnis and Shias. He's referring to material which is not in the Quran, but he's saying, I don't know if it's in the Quran or not. Now, my point here is the early Muslims had to make decisions as to what went into the Quran and what didn't go into the Quran. And you can see this decision being made here. And Ibn Abbas is saying, I don't know, maybe it's in the Quran, maybe it's not. He obviously relied upon the decision of others for this. Now, again, this is important because when Christians were putting the Bible together, that they had these same types of discussions. And so there was no discussion about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and the writings of Paul. And, there was most of it, there was no discussion at all. But for some books, there was a discussion. Well, guess what? With the Quran, they had that discussion as well. And so they shouldn't exaggerate when they had their own canonical questions as to what went into the Quran. Now, I'll just move on from here. Now, so as we can see, Muhammad never made a collection. It was his companions who made the collections after he died. Now, how many of these collections of the Quran were made by the companions of Muhammad? Well, we don't know. We don't know how many collections were made. As I've said, Muhammad commissioned certain companions to publicly teach the Quran. And this is precisely what they did. These companions used their own collections to teach their students. And they did this to entire regions. And they did this to entire regions. They taught the Quran to entire regions. We also know that these collections were not identical. So hang on. So what I just want to point out there is that as the early Muslims began their jihad conquests, they conquered Iraq, then the land of Israel, then down into Egypt. As they conquered all these regions, different companions of Muhammad went to these regions and were their teachers of the Quran. And so we know that Abdullah ibn Masud was the main teacher of the Quran for the area of modern-day Iraq. And then Ubay ibn Ka'b was the main teacher of the Quran in Syria. Okay, so you've got these different companions going to different regions. Now, what happened was that after a while, the Muslims from these different regions start meeting each other, and they start arguing as to which is the correct way to recite the Quran. So I'm going to show you that now in this hadith. Narrated by Ibrahim, the companions of Abdullah ibn Masud, remember they're from Iraq, came to Abu Darda, and before they arrived at his home, he looked for them and found them. Then he asked them, "Who among you can recite the Quran as Abdullah ibn Masud recites it?" They replied, "All of us." He asked, "Who among you knows it by heart?" They pointed to Al-Qama. Then he asked Al-Qama, "How did you hear Abdullah ibn Masud reciting Surat Al-Layl, the night?" Al-Qama recited, "By the male and the female," Surah 92 verse 3. Abu Darda said, "I testify that I heard the Prophet reciting it likewise, but these people want me to recite it by him who created male and female. But by Allah, I will not follow them." So you can see there that these different groups of Muslims are now meeting with each other, and they've learnt the Quran differently from different companions. And this is actually a significant difference. In this one, Allah is swearing, he's giving an oath, and he's swearing by creation, right? So he's saying by creation, you can trust that I'm giving the truth by male and female. But in the late, or in this other version of the verse, it's by him who created male and female. And so in this one, Allah, or whoever the speaker is not giving an oath in the name of creation. They're giving an oath in the name of Allah. And this is what we find in the Quran we have today. So these are the types of differences we're finding. Here's another example. It says here, the Prophet is closer to the believers than their own selves, and he is the father of them, and his wives are their mothers. Now, in the Quran as we have it today, that underlined section is not in it. But this is the reading of Ubay ibn Ka'b. So you'll notice that he has this extra line in there that Muhammad is the father of them, the father of Muslims, and their wives are his mothers. So that's actually a significant difference as to how you are to think about Muhammad. So these are the types of differences that we know of. We actually don't have any of these Qurans. I'll just give you one more example. So this is narrated by Zir bin Hubaysh. I met Ubay ibn Ka'b and said to him, Ibn Masud used to remove the verses of refuge from the Quranic codices, saying both of them are not part of the Quran, and do not include it, what is not part of it. Sorry, a little hard to read that one. Now, what that's saying there is that Ubay ibn Ka'b is talking to Zir about Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and he's saying that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud didn't have the last 2 chapters of the Quran in his Quran. These are called the verses of refuge. Now, that's different, right? That is different. That means that Ubay ibn Ka'b had a different number of chapters or surahs in his Quran. I'll just move on here. So what we see is that just as several of the disciples of Jesus recorded Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, so too several of Muhammad's companions recorded the Quran. And in the early days of the Quran, there were synoptic Qurans, right? They're synoptic. What I mean by that is they're highly similar, but they had significant differences between them. Not contradictory differences necessarily, in the same way that Matthew and Mark might record the same event slightly differently, but it's the same event, but there are just small differences in the way it's recorded. We actually find this with the Quran too, in the examples I've just given to you. And this was actually a subject in which the early Muslims wrote books about. They wrote books comparing these different synoptic Qurans. The word synoptic means viewed the same, to have the same sort of looking view of something. Now, these different Qurans were a subject of study for early Islamic scholars. The Arabic librarian, Ibn Abi Yaqub an-Nadim, made a famous catalogue of all the books in Arabic in the year 375 AH, 987 AD. He records 7 books under the following heading, which dealt with this topic. And so you can see here is a librarian. So here's a librarian who's making a catalogue of books, right? So this is very interesting for us. In the 4th Islamic century, right? The 4th Islamic century, here is a Muslim librarian and the catalogue he's made for libraries. And what are the titles in this group of books? The discrepancies between the manuscripts of the people of Medina, Al-Kufa, and Al-Basra, according to Al-Kaisai. So you see here that these are the people. Kufa is Basra, Medina. These are where all these different companions have gone. Another book here, the discrepancies of the manuscripts, the discrepancies of the people of Kufa, Basra, and Syria concerning the manuscripts. I'm not going to go through all of them, but this was actually an early study of the Islamic scholars to compare these manuscripts and to gather information on these different collections of the Quran. Now, how were they different? Well, I won't go through. This is again an-Nadim, and he's recording more information on them concerning the arrangement of the Quran in the manuscript of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. I found a manuscript of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the surahs of the Quran, in accordance with the following sequence. There are 110 surahs. Okay, so you see there, how many surahs in the 4th century did Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's Quran have? 110. You can see the same with Ubay ibn Ka'b's Quran, 116 surahs. So I hope you can see here that in the early decades of Islam, Muhammad never made a collection of the Quran himself. His companions made Qurans. They made their own collections. These collections had differences within the verses. The one same verse would have different content. The verses themselves, the Qurans themselves had different numbers of chapters within them. They didn't all have 114. That was only one collection that had that. And they're actually in different orders. So the surahs were all arranged differently. And those differences in orders actually show us, again, that Muhammad never made a collection. If Muhammad had made one set collection of the Quran, you wouldn't have all his companions when they come to make their Qurans, having them all in different orders, right? So from what we can tell, there was no ordering at all. This comes from later when the companions of Muhammad start doing this. And so that's just what I've got there. Different numbers of surahs arranged differently, different words for the same verse. Now, what happened? Well, what we find is that it causes trouble in the Islamic world. It causes trouble in the Islamic world. I won't read that first quote because I'm starting to run out of time a little bit here. I'll just read the second one. The Syrians, we are told, contended with the Iraqis, the former following the reading of Ubay ibn Ka'b, the later that of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, each accusing the other of unbelief. So here we have the Syrians accusing the Iraqis, and they're arguing over which version of the Quran to use. And they're actually accusing each other of unbelief. And you can imagine that these Qurans are quite different. They've got different numbers of surahs in them. The surahs are arranged differently, and there are differences within the verses themselves. Now, both of these come from companions who Muhammad said were authorized to teach the Quran, but Muslims are not finding this easy to live with. Now, we've actually got physical evidence for these different Qurans now. So this is not just a historical matter in terms of reading what people have said in the historical documents. We now actually have discovered portions of these Qurans. So we do not have the Quran according to Ibn Mas'ud or Ubay ibn Ka'b, right? We don't have their collections, in a bound Quran, which they would have been using. Maybe one day one of those will turn up in some collection somewhere, or in some library. But at the moment, none of those are extant. But we do have fragments of them in what's called the Sana manuscripts. Now, the Sana manuscripts are a series of Qurans, a collection of Qurans that were discovered in the loft of a mosque in Sana in Yemen. And these were very old Qurans. I think they're the oldest Qurans that we have. And when we look at these, we can see certain things. So if you look at this one here, you can see how there's a dark print, but then there's a very light print behind it. Okay. Now, what's happened there is that this Quran has been written on once, and then someone has washed off the original writing of the Quran on it, and then they have written another version of the Quran on top of it. And this is called a palimpsest. That's the technical name. But it's where you wash something off and then you write a new one. You know how we get whiteboards these days? People write on whiteboards when they're lecturing, and sometimes they write on a whiteboard and it's with a permanent marker. And when you write on a whiteboard with a permanent marker, it's stuck on there, you can't get it off, and then you got to get a special solvent to wash it. But even when you wash it, you can still see it, right? That's what's happening here. Okay, that they've written on it, and then they've said, oh, we need to rewrite this for whatever reason. So they wash it clean, but you can still see the original text underneath. And when we look at these, we can actually figure out what the original text was. And when we look at it, this is what scholars have found. So we've got here the main significance of the Sana Stanford 07 manuscript is that the lower text does not belong to this Uthmatic textual tradition. Now, Uthman is the standard text that we use today. So the Quran that Muslims are using today is the one from Uthman. But what this is saying is that the text below this text is not from Uthman. It's not the standardized text. And so it belongs to one of the other companions and was part of one of their collections. So we've got here, it belongs to some other textual tradition, which is designated here as C1, companion 1. So the codex of a companion of the Prophet and the Quran of the Prophet. So this is proof that we have these Qurans from these other companions of the Prophet. It's not just Islamic history says it everywhere, but we've also got evidence over here. So what have I got here? The Sana specimens are, however, not only proofs of their existence, but allow for the hypothesis that even more arrangements were in use, which differed from the official sequence, as well as from those reported to go back to Ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b. In one case, the end of Surah 26 is followed by the beginning of Surah 37 on the same page, of course, which corresponds exactly with the leap reported about Ibn Masud's arrangement. So I will finish my presentation there. What do we do with this? Well, I guess just what I wanted to show you was that the claims Muslims make about the Quran are not even true according to their own histories. Okay, they're not even true according to their own histories. And if you want to have a level playing field with the Muslim, when they're attacking the Bible, you've got to say, hang on, we've got to look at both the Bible and the Quran. And let's just look at what you're claiming about the Quran. I want to get clear what you're claiming about the Quran. What are you saying about it? And they're generally going to say there's one perfect Quran, no variation, no editing, Muhammad perfectly memorized it, all those things that we looked at the beginning. But you can now say to them, hopefully, and my leaflet will help you to do this, you can hopefully say, look, I want to get clear what you're saying about the Quran. Let's get that clear, right? And then you use my booklet to say, well, hang on, it's not what you're saying. There's more than one Quran. Muhammad didn't even collect it. There's a whole range of collections. You get the general point. So what I'm hoping you can do there is when the Muslim comes in and they're very, they may be quite aggressive and very, maybe even a little arrogant, just thinking that they can dismiss the Bible because there's one Quran. Now, hopefully you can show them that, from their own sources that they're meant to accept, from Bukhari and Muslim, they're meant to accept these. You can show them that what they're saying is simply not true about the Quran, and so they shouldn't go exaggerating. And hopefully that will make them a little more open to the Bible, and hopefully it'll mean that you won't be deceived by what they say about the Quran. All right, I'm going to finish there.
Thanks, Samuel.
Yeah.
And just to remind the viewer here, as noted at the beginning of the broadcast, when he introduced the topic, he said this can be found on engagingwithislam.org. And is it summarized there, or all of this is on there, Samuel?
It is a comprehensive booklet. So it's about a 24-page booklet taking you through all of this. I've gone through the first half.
Okay.
On a later program, maybe the next time I'm on, I'll do the second half.
Sounds great.
But the idea is, I don't just want to give you the training on this. I want to give you the tools so that you can go and use it, because, it's fine to look at this information, but you've got to have it in a format that you can run with, that you can, print out, and, you take it to a printer, you take the PDF to a printer, and they'll print it up for you for about $1.
Great idea. Great suggestion. All right. I want to ask a question about the Surah 495 you brought up. Yes. And I want to see a couple questions actually about it. How did it evolve from one, or do we have a date of when the first verse was noted, and then a date when it got changed? Yeah,
look, that is a great question. I don't know if we would have a date to be that specific in Muhammad's life. Maybe there is a date that Islamic tradition has assigned to that conversation that Muhammad had with Amir bin Maktab. There may be a date for that, but I don't exactly know. Now again, I'm just taking these hadiths as they stand. I'm not saying whether or not the hadiths are true or false, anything like that. Other Christians will look into those things. I'm just taking them as they stand. So, some people might want to say that hadith was written centuries later. I'm not looking at it from that perspective. It's what we've got in their collections, but the exact date of when that event happened, all I can say was that, it was during Muhammad's lifetime. It would be, okay, no, we can say a little bit by noting when Surah 4 was written. If I'll quickly look up when Surah 4 was written, and that might give us a rough date for it. Let me just get this here. What have we got here? No, my Quran here doesn't give me a date. I would say, no, here we go, the 4th or 5th year of the Hijrah. So that is, Muhammad has gone from Mecca to Medina. And so it's in that Meccan phase, it's in that Medinan phase of his life where he's now calling people to jihad. And so this Quran here is saying, it's the 4th or 5th year of the Hijrah. And so, he's been in Mecca for 4 or 5 years. So that's okay. He's working on this surah.
And so a follow-up is, obviously you've had a lot of dialogues with Muslims. What do they do with this change when you bring it to them?
Yeah, well, they have to accept it, right? I mean, I've had some Muslims say that is not authentic and you can't trust that. And, the problem is it's in Bukhari and Muslim and it's confirmed in the Quran where it's saying, Muhammad was changing the text. So it was a significant issue. It's dealt with in the Quran itself. There had to be a response in the Quran, probably for the Muslims to say, yeah, hang on, how do we understand this? Well, Allah wills it. So look, for most Muslims, I mean, I've never really had a reply of saying, the replies I've had have been, it's false, you can't accept it, but it's hard for a Muslim to say that, because if they're not going to accept what Bukhari and Muslim both agree on, then they've really got no Islam, right? Yeah. You've got nothing at that point. So they have to accept it. And then for the others, they're generally just silent. They just go, okay. So I brought it up in debates and they don't bring anything up about it. Or they'll just say, yeah, that's how the Quran came about. That's how the Quran came about. But it has to make them think, right? And it does mean that they have to stop saying that it simply came unedited, because that is clearly, an evolution of the text. They might want to say, well, Allah was the one who was editing it. Allah's the one who's doing it. And then you want to just push back and say, well, why didn't he do it in the first place? Why didn't Allah consider people with disabilities in the first time he gave the verse? Why not just say it the full way, the correct way first? Because it really looks just like the type of thing a human would do. You say something. I mean, I do this in my writing. I'll say something, then I'll talk to people and go, I could have said that better. And so, even after this, I've got to go back and edit up some of my notes. That's just what humans do. Well, that's what we see Muhammad doing, right? Muhammad's doing exactly what humans do. There's nothing divine in what he's doing there. So, Muslims just have to take this on board, and we need to say to them, please don't exaggerate. That's just editing.
And then along the same lines, how do they get out of the conundrum of Ibn Abbas saying, I don't remember, or I don't know whether this was really part of the Quran?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know, because what they want to say is that all of these companions had perfectly memorized the Quran during Muhammad's time. And so this is the story they tell us. All the companions had memorized the Quran and they all knew it exactly. But when you go and read, again, the Islamic sources, well, I don't know what they say. I mean, I put it there and I just say, please stop exaggerating. Ibn Abbas is a significant companion. He obviously didn't know everything that was in the Quran. That could have been part of the Quran according to someone else. It wasn't his decision. It was someone else's. Look, how do Muslims respond? Hopefully they're just going to stop exaggerating. That's what I hope. I've had some, again, I bring this up and they'll say, that's false, and they just try to reject it. But others will know they just can't reject it. Now, again, what I'm just trying to say here is we both have canonical questions. And so in the early centuries of Christianity, in about the 4th century, Christians are in a position where they can start to make their canon. And so it was actually from the 2nd century, they're starting to clarify amongst themselves which books, are part of the scriptures. Because remember, different apostles of Jesus went to different regions. And so not all the Christians had all of the New Testament at the same time. It took time for it to go around. It just did. And so there has to be a discussion for that to happen. Now, that's not a bad thing. That's just life, right? The apostle writes a letter to one region. It takes a while for it to go across to all the Christian world. And so we had our discussions on that, and you can read about those and the way we authenticated it. The point is, Muslims have the same discussion, but they pretend as if they didn't. And so they try to say that, you've had this discussion, and so the Bible's uncertain in some way, but the Quran is just straight from God. And I'm trying to say, just stop exaggerating. Stop exaggerating. We've both had those decisions, and we've both obviously worked through it in a way that we're happy with.
All right. So thank you, Samuel. You are a gift to this ministry. You are a gift to Christendom. Keep up the good work. We'll see you again soon. And I don't see any other. Let me see. Make sure we don't have any other questions. Doesn't seem to be. Okay.
That is fine. It was
okay.
Great to be with you.
Yeah. We'll leave it for the rest for next time. So again, we appreciate you.
In my next time, I will go from the situation of these different Qurans in the Muslim world, and we're going to see how do we get to the Qurans we have today, and we'll take that journey.
All right, and everybody, thank you for joining us. You can look forward to Anthony Rogers with us next week. Have a great week.
Bye.
I think we can.